Hello, and welcome to today's episode of the podcast, Little Eyes, Little Ears, Centering Children and Youth in Gender-Based Violence Work. This podcast is from the Learning Network at the Center for Research and Education on Violence Against Women and Children at Western University. The purpose of this podcast is to enhance work to support children and youth in contexts of intimate partner violence. I'm Dr. Linda Baker, and I'm pleased to host today's episode with our amazing guest, Lorene Stanwick. Lorene Stanwick is a playwright, actor, counselor, and teacher. She is the founder of Create Truth Productions, a creative forum dedicated to using the arts to raise awareness of the issue of sibling abuse and to telling stories that reflect the creative and varied ways that people survive trauma. With a BA in drama in education, a Bachelor of Education in English and Dramatic Arts, and an MEd in counseling psychology, Lorene has a unique lens through which to explore the healing and transformative power of telling our stories. Her play, Broken Branches, produced in association with Workman Arts in 2019, explores the aftermath of sibling abuse, the least discussed but most prevalent form of domestic abuse. She envisions Broken Branches as the theatrical springboard to further projects about this issue, including a solo play, public conversations, and collaborations with relevant groups. Lorene, it is a great honor for you to be with us today. We've been so looking forward to it. And we met you when you were working on Broken Branches. And I wonder if you'll start us off by just telling us more about Broken Branches and the creative ways in which you've approached this very important issue.
Well, thank you for the lovely introduction. And I'm so thrilled and honored to be here and to be part of this podcast. And just to be associated with you, Linda, is like an honor. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
and likewise.
So Broken Branches came about, it started many, many years ago in my mind. I was in my mid to late 30s when I realized that the root of my issues was a sibling abuse. And I had seen therapists for years, and I had talked about what had happened as my childhood, and nobody had ever used the term abuse to describe what happened to with my siblings. And shortly after that sort of light bulb, aha, angel singing moment, what came through was just, I got to write a play. I've got to turn this into a play. I've got to create awareness. If I didn't know that it was abuse, and I had studied psychology, and I was really into understanding kids and emotional abuse and things like that. And if I didn't recognize it, I realized there must be a lot of people out there who are in the same situation as me. And sure enough, I got online at that point in history, and there was almost nothing. Now there's a lot more. Like, it's come a long way in the last 20 years or something. Maybe not quite that many, but it's come a long way. And I had to write a play. I had to do it that way, partly because I think it's important. I think we learn best through story. I think we learn best when we meet characters, when we meet people, when it's lived experience, when it's not just a PowerPoint presentation telling us statistics. And so it was really clear for me. Then as I started doing my research, I realized, well, there's so many different kinds of sibling abuse. There's sexual abuse, there's emotional, psychological abuse, and there's physical abuse. And there's all these different dyads. There's brother to brother, brother to sister, sister to sister. There's all of that in there. And so the way I constructed the play was to have 3 separate stories. So there was a storyline that was a brother violence that was passed down from father, generational, intergenerational violence. There was a young woman who had been sexually abused by her brother when she was young. And there was a sister physical and emotional abuse story. And so, yeah. I mean, it was such a challenge and such a, how do I put this? It was really, truly a life-changing moment. And part of that was being able to meet so many different people. It gave me the excuse to go out and talk to people all the time about sibling abuse, right? Like I'd talk to strangers, I'd talk to people I worked with. I wrote you, somebody told me about your newsletter, and I wrote you. That's how we met, was the newsletter that you put out as a result of hearing the current interview that I was in with it. It was just such a lovely come full circle with that. I got from so many people was just, you got to do this. You got to tell these stories. You got to do this. That's my story. I had so many people come up after the play and say, that's my story. I've never seen it on stage before. And with the talkbacks, we had the opportunity to talk to professors and mental health workers and survivors and therapists, all kinds of different people. And the fellow who did the first book on sibling abuse, Vernon Weehee, he came up to see the play and to do a talk back. So anyway, it feels like we've come a long way since I started writing the play, but we still have so far to go, because everything I read is still, how come nobody's talking about this? How come nobody's doing anything about this? How come our stories aren't out there? So
it's just wonderful to hear you sharing that, and a couple things, just to the extent that you feel comfortable. I'm just trying to imagine what that was like, having been through this yourself and then getting immersed in the characters you're creating in order to share the story and to help create awareness. And I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit about what that was like for you.
I'm going to tell you a little story to get back to that. I was at a workshop with Gabor Mate, who's the trauma expert.
Yes.
And it was my first, I went through a couple of rounds of writing. I mean, there were so many drafts of the play, but there was a couple of big rounds of it. And I was in my first big round of it. And I went up to him at lunch. He was open to questions. And I went over to him and I said, I'm very excited. I'm about to tell him that I told him that I'm writing a play about sibling abuse. And I'm fully expecting him to say, well, that's really great. Nobody's talking about that. But what he did, he looked at me and he said, just don't forget that the perpetrator is a victim too. And that changed the entire trajectory of the play, of each character, because I really realized how true that was, and how much I have to get inside not only the survivor, the victim and survivor, but I had to get inside the head of the perpetrators as well, and really understand what it is, or do my best to understand what it is. And we're such complex beings. We aren't all victim and all perpetrator. We aren't all one or the other. We all have our shadow sides and our dark sides. So I guess it enabled me to really go deeper with each of the characters, sort of recognizing that transition from victim to survivor. Realizing that I have to do that. I had to, as in the writing, do that dance of, these are victims, but they're also survivors. Because what I really wanted to do, my big goal with the project, with Broken Branches, was to reach survivors, because I didn't know that I was a survivor. There's got to be lots of other people out there in the same situation. So it was really to find within each of these characters, what do they have in them that will make them a survivor and not a victim anymore.
Right. And I think, having seen the play and been so moved by it, I think you were very successful at getting inside the characters, and they came alive on the stage in an amazing way. I guess one of my other questions, Lorene, is why specifically a play? So, you've talked about, you just believe that telling stories is the way, not PowerPoints, lectures, but there's lots of other creative mediums, and you chose a play, at least if your first project that I became aware of. Why a play?
Well, at heart, I'm an actor. That was from the time I was 4. I wanted to be on stage more than anything in the world. It didn't quite go that way. I struggled for a lot of years with a lot of anxiety and depression and mental health issues and addiction. And I was kind of a mess. And frankly, I couldn't get it together to do that as a career, to be fully honest. And then life took over and life takes over, but it's still in me, and theater is still in me and who I am and what I love to do and experience. And I think like I'm not an academic. Like I don't think in terms of papers and PhDs. I'm just not like that. I'm like, get your hands dirty and get in here and let's like put this into our bodies and feel what it feels like. So I guess that it's just who I am.
So a big part of your work, as you've been describing it, is really to name the issue, sibling abuse, sibling violence, and to increase awareness, and that's been such an important step, and you've seen progress. But I'm curious, why do you think it's taken so long? What gets in the way when it comes to sibling abuse? That is it true for all forms of abuse, or is there something about sibling abuse that's different than other forms, such as intimate partner violence or parent-child physical abuse? What is it about sibling abuse?
I think I think we've normalized it by calling it rivalry, right? I think that was a grave error in whoever decided to put that word into play a long time ago, because it totally undermines what can actually be happening. Yes, there is rivalry. Yes, there is normal conflict that happens when two siblings both want the same thing or both want the attention of the parent. But when it's balanced, it's rivalry. It becomes abuse when there's an imbalance. I mean, I can go on in more detail about that, but I think to answer your question more succinctly, the normalization of the abuse, I think, is number one. That we just accept it. Kids will be kids. They beat each other up. That's what they do. They name call. They some people even believe that it's necessary because it helps them to establish, a little bit of backbone or a little bit of a thicker skin when they have to go out in the real world. It's like, yep, your brother's treating you like that, or your sister's treating you like that. Wait till you see how other people are going to treat you. So sometimes it's even encouraged. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the biggest thing. I think the other big thing is that we don't have a reporting mechanism for it. There is, my understanding, you'll know more about this than I do, but my understanding is when it's sexual abuse, it's a lot more clearly defined. When it's physical or emotional abuse or psychological abuse, it's very nebulous, right? And parents would have to turn their own kids in, and parents don't want to do that. We still live under what goes on behind closed doors stays behind closed doors, except when it comes to child abuse. Like, we know now that adults can't do that to kids. We know now that adult partners can't do that to their kids, but we still haven't gotten to a way of saying that kid can't do that to that kid. In school, yeah, it's starting. It's better than it was. But I don't know. I mean, it's still, the parents that I've talked to still really struggle with that.
From your experience and your own experience, but also you talk to so many people, and so many people have shared their story of sibling abuse with you. Do you think parents sometimes aren't aware that it's happening?
For sure. For sure, for sure, for sure. Um, well, I ended up telling my dad, he was 90 when I told him.
Wow.
And because he couldn't understand why I wasn't connecting with my sister, I'd go to visit him and he'd say, let's go visit your sister. And I would never want to. And finally, I did explain to him why. And he was shocked, which shocked me
Yeah.
because I thought, like, I used to run to you all the time crying. How could you be so shocked? So,
Yes.
but he had no idea the extent of it
Right.
and how damaging it was.
Yeah.
And so I think that's back to that normalization. We expect kids to fight. And so, my mom used to say, "Oh, you two go play in the traffic." It was just like, "Oh, go kill each other. Go somewhere else and kill each other. Don't bother me so much."
Yeah.
It was kind of like that it's just they don't know what's going on. And so, yeah, yeah.
So what do we need to do then? What would be more helpful? Like in terms of, let's start by if you're talking to parents then, what you described your dad, he didn't know the extent. He knew there was conflict and tussling and whatnot, as you say, that sort of normalized um, pushing and shoving between children. But what do parents need to understand about how they may be more proactive and have agency in terms of understanding, and what would be more supportive to children for parents to do?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think your word proactive is the key, because we tend to just sort of parent as we were parented. Some people go to parenting classes, but I don't think most do. Um, I think it's about being proactive. It's about being invitational. It's about specifically saying to your kids, there's this thing called sibling abuse. Like, be really direct about it, and depending on the situation, of course. I think they can watch for things. If kids don't want to be alone with their sibling where they used to, and now they don't, or if they're really giving their parents a hard time about going out and leaving them, because so often it happens because elder siblings are in charge of younger siblings.
And maybe
And,
even formally babysitting, in that you
oh,
can use that term.
for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, yeah. And that's like prime time. I mean, our prime time was after school. My parents both worked. So after school, we'd both be home. And that was when I got it the worst. So, and being aware of, like, I could never understand why nobody understood why I hated my sister so much and why nobody ever asked me. It was forever. Like, I never liked her. And nobody ever questioned that. It was just, it just, so okay. So from my experience and from other people, I think one of the key things is that kids so desperately need to be seen and heard,
Yes.
and for who they are as individuals. That like there's factors that play into it, like favoritism, you know, the labels that kids get, the golden child can do no harm, right? Often it's the golden child who's doing the most harm because they can get away with it. And they can threaten in a way that they know they have the confidence to threaten with because they know they can get away with it. Like, their favoritism, comparing kids. Why can't you be as good at sports as your brother is, or as your sister is? Or it's about seeing each kid for who they are as an individual and hearing who they are and making time for each of them as special time, not just, we're doing this as a family all the time, but make time for each individual child. Being invitational, being open, asking open-ended questions. How because kids are so trained to, they're kids who are being abused are often scared into silence, right? And so, yeah, and so it's providing, it's like, here's the house, open all the windows to provide as many ways in as you can. Yeah.
As I listen to you, Lorene, I'm thinking that, we have that term now, helicopter parenting, and sort of the connotes this idea of the parent over-involved, hovering around, etc. And I think that there's such a continuum in what you're describing is, I think back to so many parents, and even in parenting programs, it's encouraged when things are just, as you say, that sort of normal conflict that happens, and there's a sort of an equal power balance between siblings, similar in age, similar in size, similar in abilities, that the idea is don't interfere too much, let them sort things through. And yet the worst possible advice, if there's actually sibling abuse going on, in what you're describing, is that finding that time to have a talk and spend time and listen with that child, not with the siblings together, but individually with each sibling, is really coming out strongly in your comments. Lorene, you've provided some really sound advice for parents. And I wonder if you could talk now about what might be particularly supportive to children who are experiencing this, whether they be preschoolers, school-age children, or adolescents, because I think we know now that it happens throughout all the life stages of childhood and youth. So I'm just curious, what would you want to share directly with young people who might be experiencing this or might be engaging in abusive behaviors towards their siblings?
Oh, wow. I keep coming back to the thought of each one of us is sacred. Each individual, each human has the right to be here and the right to be safe and the right to be seen and heard. And every single one of us, whether we are harming or being harmed. And, I don't know, it's like I've got this image of a light, a light inside of us. We all have that light inside of us. And over the course of, if you're violated, if you've been abused, if you've been hurt, it's like the light dims and dims and dims, but it never goes out. It's always there. And it's about finding the things that brighten it up again for yourself. The research on trauma is really clear that connection and, if you have one person in your life, if a child has one adult in their life who sees them, who hears them, who knows them, who honors them, that's enough to get them through. Like you can be okay with just about anything if you've got someone in your life who sees you and knows you. And so I guess I would say to a kid in either position, find that person, find that adult. It might be a teacher, it might be a friend's parent, it might be the ed assistant at the school, it might be a neighbor. Find that, because it's only through honoring yourself and that little light inside of you, and it's like it's all we have to take through with us in our entire life, right? We've got that light, and then as we get older, we learn to find ways to shine it on ourselves, like to find what we love, to do what we love, to find what gives us moments of joy. So if there's a kid who, you get your joy in being alone down at the water, then find your way to do that. Find your way to, figure out what makes you happy. And find that person that you can talk to, I guess, would be the main things.
Very powerful. I'm thinking about the things you've shared in our discussion today, and I'm just thinking, when you think to the future, Lorene, what would you like to see change in how we support children and youth who are experiencing and surviving sibling abuse?
Well, there's a whole bunch of things. I think the I would like to know that sibling abuse is as common in our language as child abuse, intimate partner violence, spousal abuse, that those words are there. All the lists that you see, there's never sibling abuse on those lists. Not to diminish the importance of what has happened and the importance of the other forms of abuse, but I want to see sibling abuse on every one of those lists. It's time. It's time to get it there. I think that in counseling school, like when I was in counseling school, when I was doing my master's, there was nothing in any of my textbooks on sibling abuse. It's not built into training for therapists, for counselors, for teachers, for anybody who works with kids should have specific training on sibling abuse. They should have to meet people who are survivors. They should have to, get some training and understanding it. One thing that I have found is that a lot of therapists will say, once I understand what it is, what's going on, the therapeutic process isn't all that different from working with survivors of other kind of abuse. So it really is about the language and getting it out there and making it more common, more like showing it for the prevalence that it has. Like there's more violence between siblings than anybody. A child is somewhere between 5 and 20 times more likely to be sexually abused by a sibling than anybody. Like it's so prevalent, it's so common, yet it's the least discussed. So that in itself has to be remedied. And I think one of the ways is educating the professionals. I think another way is, finding some kind of legal recourse. How do we support the parents who want to help their kids but don't know how? Who can they go to? What kinds of conversations can be had with the child protective services? What can they do? What can children's aid do to help make them more approachable, make it more accessible to talk to them about what do I do when I have my 2 kids? So finding through the systems that are in place, making a space in those systems for this conversation to happen. I think another thing that has really come to light in the last few years since COVID, trauma has become such a common conversation, right? And the ACE studies, the adverse childhood experiences. There's nothing about siblings in the ACE studies. I've looked at a whole bunch of different questionnaires and none of them mention siblings. Put siblings in the ACE studies. That should be in there. It isn't just an adult or guardian or somebody 5 years older than you, because it could be somebody 3 years older than you. And if we don't recognize ourselves in those, in there, that in itself is saying, oh, you're okay. You're okay because they were only 3 years older than you. So you're fine, and yeah, it's not. So it's got to be in the ACE studies. And I think the last thing is that, and this is broader than just sibling abuse, but we have to find a way to make mental health supports accessible. Like there's so much need for therapy, for counseling, for one-on-one help, for specific group help. And that still is not built into our healthcare system. And very well, it's gotten better, but it still is sorely lacking for people who really need help. You have to end up in the hospital to get some help. And that's not okay. It's not good enough. We have to be better than that. So that would be my other really fight to the end for it. Yeah.
Well, one thing that I would say is I would hope that there may be a way for more people to see your amazing play, because I think that's Broken Branches is such a powerful medium for increasing awareness and reaching not just the potential helpers, but as you say, survivors who may feel very alone and haven't had the way to name what happened to them and to understand some of the impacts. So we look forward to future creative um, endeavors that you will no doubt take on. We so appreciate your advocacy and your creativity, and it truly is inspiring, Lorene. And we're very grateful that you were with us today and sharing not just what you've been working on in terms of advocacy, but your personal story as well, and how that informs everything you do.
Thank you. Thank you for your support.
For our listeners, please stay tuned for our next episode in this series. And you can do that by looking for an email from the Learning Network team to see when the next episode will be ready. So again, thank you to Lorene Stanwick, and take care and goodbye.